Good morning, everyone. I'm Kate Becker, and I have the great honor of serving on the Music Policy Forum Board. And my day and night job is as the Creative Economy Director in King County, Washington. I look out at this room, and I see so many people who I have had the opportunity to engage with in different ways over time. Some people who have been wise advisors and colleagues and consultants and in the trenches with me over the years, and it is just a really exciting moment to be here to talk with you about the Cascadia Music Corridor and the possibilities for this initiative with all of you involved. These folks, I've had the sheer pleasure, along with Eric Gilbert, of really digging into this work over the last couple of years, and they are my trusted colleagues in doing this, and yet we need all of you involved, and that's what today is about, is to come together and figure out how can we really advance this. We believe there is huge potential in it, we know there is huge potential in it, and we want all of you to be involved. So, with that, we're going to talk about what these 4 states are doing and where there is opportunity to move forward, and hopefully you will engage in this with us. So, here we go. I think you're first. Yes, indeed. Mic on? I am. Thank you very much. All right. Are we going to? Oh, it's up there. Thank you. All right. We didn't test run this, everyone. All right. So, the Cascadia Initiative, these are the 4 people who are up here on stage. As you can see, my esteemed colleagues, Nathan Walker from Boise, and Meara Mclaughlin from Portland in Oregon, and Marian from Alaska. And they will all introduce themselves as we go. And Eric Gilbert has been an anchor in this. He just, to my surprise, did not come on stage with us. All right, so Washington State. You know, we have a lot of good things going on, and we have a lot of work to do here in Washington State. So, look, we don't have great data, unfortunately. We have a plan in place now. In Washington State this year, we got a creative economy lead for the state of Washington with the Washington Department of Commerce. She's here with us, Shannon Halberstadt. And she and I have cooked up a plan of how we get the data we need when many politicians along the way have been reluctant to do the studies that tell us the information that we really need. Also, really, the data systems aren't built to support a gig economy. The music economy is largely a gig economy, and the systems are built to give you the data on salaried 40-hour-a-week jobs. That's not what a lot of artists do. That's not what a lot of venue workers do. It's not what a lot of folks in the creative economy do. So we don't have good, solid data. Studies have been done over time, but I snapshotted the data from the 50-state study, which I believe is really low compared to what we know and live in Washington. And it's up here on the screen for you to see. But, sorry, I'm having a, there we go, okay. And we do studies on the nonprofit sector, and we do those really well. And we get lots of folks involved, and we have some data there, but it is the private sector, the small business sector, the working creatives that we do not know enough about, that we really need to get that data from. So we are working towards that, and Shannon and I are kicking off a plan in January, along with some other folks in this room, to finally figure out what is really going on in Washington's creative economy and in our music sector. So, characteristics of Washington, you know, we're famous for grunge. There's so much more to our Washington music scene. We have a tremendous hip hop scene. We have a tremendous jazz history. We have music of all genres happening throughout the state. We're very independent. Don Pitts did a study with us back in 2014, 2015, and he was shocked how much musicians were really intent upon doing their own thing and not focused at all on how to make a living. This is a little bit problematic in a city that is sometimes called the most expensive city in America. And outside of the city, it's not especially affordable either, although it does get a little more affordable in the rural areas. One of the great things we have in Washington State is a number of tremendous nonprofits, some of the leaders of whom are in this room, things like Totem Star and the Meara Project and Sonic Guild and SMASH, Seattle Musicians Access to Sustainable Healthcare is an incredible organization we have going on in Washington. The Residency, I mean, the list goes on of tremendous nonprofits that we have, but we still have so much work to do to help the private sector. My work, leading the Creative Economy Initiative in King County, is really an economic development initiative because we have a tremendous organization called For Culture that does all of our cultural funding. They support over 700 organizations in the county. My work is to help people figure out how to actually make a living in our expensive environment. Displacement has been a very real issue. Many of the artists who lived in the city now have moved out to the rural areas. That is part of why I left leading the Office of Film and Music in the city of Seattle to work in King County, because so many of our creatives are not in the city limits anymore. And Washington is mostly a rural state. Seattle is the urban capital of it, but we are really mostly a rural state outside of the urban core. So, some of our challenges I've referenced already. Vulnerable populations often get the public support which they absolutely need. Critical human needs are real. But we can't neglect the creative sector in that. I often make the argument to politicians that if we do not support our working creatives, they will become part of that vulnerable population. They live so close to the edges that we have to fortify that and make it possible for them to keep working in our region. We have had the good fortune, as I do now, to have a political leader who knows the importance of this work. I happen to work and serve on the cabinet of King County Executive Dow Constantine, who is the most music-loving politician I have ever known. And he actually flew to DC last year for the Music Policy Forum conference and keynoted the conference. So gives you a sense of the traction I have when I'm trying to do things right now. When you have that, when you have political leaders like Mayor Mclaughlin, I first met her a few years ago at Treefort, and when she said to me, I have come to all 9 years of Treefort and I bring my children, I thought, you are in good hands here in Boise for moving things forward. But when that iron is hot, you must strike. You must move forward because there will be resistance in other times. So when you get that political alignment, run with it, push forward, kick the doors down, bring the people with you, and make sure that those politicians know what their community wants. So yeah, I mentioned displacement. It's been so real, both with the pandemic as well as the high cost of living in our urban core. And one of the other things that we really have going on in Washington is we have so many music lovers and so many musicians making great work, but we don't have all the infrastructure to help them advance their careers. And it's been an issue in our region as long as I can remember, that we need more managers, we need more music attorneys and art attorneys, and we need more publicists and folks who can help them be successful in their careers. So we have an infrastructure problem still. And we have cultural space being threatened by development all the time. We had a fabulous organization lift up over the last few years in Seattle and King County called the Cultural Space Agency, which is using public dollars now to secure some of our cultural spaces, but we're losing more than we can secure, and that's just reality. So. And philanthropy and government don't always understand the fragile state of our music ecosystem. They tend to think that I saw this clearly through the pandemic as I worked closely with our independent music venues, and folks thought, venues? Why are you centering the venues? The venues make money hand over fist. Oh no, they don't. They work so close to that margin that it's, especially the independent venues, which is mostly what our music ecosystem is comprised of, very risky business that they are in. And then another challenge we have is we still have some archaic liquor laws on our books in Washington. So just our reality and the environment that we work in. Some of our successes, we have had some hard-won successes over the years, and we have been able, so for instance, we have a Seattle Music Commission that started in 2010. In fact, Ben London, who's somewhere with us here, was our founding Music Commission chair. Shannon was on the commission in the beginning. I had the honor of serving on the commission. And so the commission is the city body that really advises government on policy changes in our music ecosystem. We have anchored a few offices over time that really will help carry on the work when we're not there anymore. The King County Office of Economic Opportunity and Creative Economy was established in the last budget cycle. Prior to that, I'd been appointed by the executive. We want to anchor that work so that when he's not there and I'm not there, the work is part of the county fabric. The Washington Department of Commerce, as I mentioned, hired Shannon Halberstadt as the creative economy lead. Now we have the Department of Commerce focused on music economy. And we have Scott Pluskulik with us. He's the nightlife business advocate at the City of Seattle, another position that is anchored and has been there for a number of years now. And those kinds of things help carry the work on when the Jimmy Halliburtons and the Mayor McLeans are no longer in their position. So whatever you can do to get them embedded into your fabric in a way that it carries on, very valuable. Let's see, I mentioned some of the critical organizations already. I didn't mention WAMA, the Washington Nightlife and Music Association, which formed during the pandemic and is comprised of independent venue owners. We're still trying to figure out how to fund that thing and anchor that so that it has a future. And one of the other successes we saw was that during the pandemic, people who were under threat from the realities of COVID really pulled together, and some business owners who'd long been in competition with each other are now tight allies, working together, pulling in the same direction. And then the last thing, this amazing, amazing effort that has been underway for 20 years and has had 3 incarnations, a big political push and policy and legislation developed, trying to get this through, finally passed a couple of days before I came here. It is amazing. I mentioned For Culture, which funds all of our cultural organizations throughout the county, has been funded at near the $10 million level. We just passed a 0.1% sales tax that will generate close to $100 million a year for our cultural sector in King County. It's a huge win. The county executive pushed it forward. The county council passed it by a 9-0 vote. We don't get many 9-0 votes in King County, but it's really the people, it's the activists, the advocates, and our colleagues at Inspire Washington who made it clear that there was so much community support to get this done, and we now will have a properly funded cultural sector in King County, Washington. And with that, I'm going to pass it to my esteemed colleague.
You don't even have to.
Oh, she's got her own, but she will need this. Thank you all.
I think that's on. There we go. Hi, so I'm Meara Mclaughlin, and and I run MusicPortland and Music Oregon, which are 2 nonprofits. One is a trade organization focused on the economic concerns and policy and infrastructure needed statewide for professional music. And the other is a cultural support organization specifically around creative empowerment and equity initiatives. So just to make it clear, they're both statewide, but because the huge majority of our population and activity happens in the Portland area, I'll be talking kind of about both. MusicPortland was founded 5 years ago, and so we've got a lot more data about this, the concentrated center. But we did just finish our first ever economic impact study and commercial music census that went out across the state, and it shocked people. We got the governor's office and the state legislature to recognize commercial music as an emerging economic sector, which put it in line with technology and timber and fishing and manufacturing, which was a big deal, and it's the beginning of a lot of things. Those designations mean a lot if you can get them, because then you can use that for other things. And we used it to fund the economic impact study. So we're close to $4 billion conservatively estimated. The economists said that they anticipate it's probably underreported by as much as 30%. Because when they first looked at it, for any of you that have tried to research music as an industry sector, it doesn't color in the lines that other industries do. So the standard codes and things are not set up to measure it. The census was really interesting too, because when you have, like almost all of us have, concentrated music economies in one or a few markets in your state, and then a lot of distributed activity, it's really, really hard to find those people. So as a group, we all worked together to come up with a taxonomy and a scripting process that allowed us to scrape the internet to find those far-flung music businesses. So I think that was one of the, we started just working together. We share everything. We're unnaturally close up here. There's, with a $4 billion conservatively estimated economic impact, that by this report, we employ more people than cannabis, fishing, and timber in the state, which for Oregon, those are the bigs. But it's because we have so many people. So we've confirmed with CD Baby, we did a custom research project, 14,000 unique recording acts in the state of Oregon, with the majority of those in the greater Portland area. Nearly 1,200 music businesses across the state, and 600 and more music venues. And that's everything from dedicated music venues down to mixed-use bars and restaurants. And we have a lot of manufacturers, instrument gear manufacturers. We have 170 plus instrument and gear manufacturers. It's a real sort of hot point, which makes a difference in a state that doesn't have a sales tax. Because we can talk about economic activity all day long, and they're like, yeah, okay, that's just money changing hands. We don't get any piece of it. But when you talk about traded sector, things that create things that are sold elsewhere, and what I'm advocating for too is that music that is created in Oregon travels to other places and brings money back to Oregon. So I think that there's conversations to be had there in any of your states, because all of the states care about the income that's being brought to them from other places. We have the region's only record pressing facility. So our character, fiercely independent, DIY to a fault, as Kate mentioned. There's this weird dynamic tension, I think, across the whole region between ambition and sort of creative worth. If you're hustling too hard, you probably aren't that good. It's like, so this weird sort of anti-ambitious thing, which we have to all buck because it's a little silly. So Oregon and Portland in particular have a lot of risk takers. We have CD Baby that basically said, well, there must be a better way to distribute independent music, and created a whole industry. We have Discogs, which is the largest, Discogs. We've got a lot of musicians that pride themselves on transcending genre and doing blends and mixes and kind of exploring new sonic territory. Portland's definitely a talent incubator. It's where a lot of musicians go once they've been successful and they come back to Portland. And we've got a great sort of array of venues that cultivate and incubate talent. We also have an incredible music fan community, and I think that's one of probably our greatest glories, is that we have a Portland music community that supports more than 300 music venues that have music 2 or more times a week, every single week, plus, at last count, 1,200 house shows per month. So it's an incredible amount of music that is being supported and only being done because people are going out to see it. And I think that they get there early. They look at the opening band. They are willing to try new things. And I think that's something that everybody needs to cultivate in their music consumers, is that they want to be the first ones there. You want to find the next big thing. We've got all locally owned independent music venues. Oh, okay. And Live Nation is making an attempt right now to become the first corporate owned in the marketplace. So we've got... So we've got really high cost of living. We have challenges in our alliance building because the arts and culture community, I think a lot of them see us as kind of a lumbering hulk that's going to come in and consume what is already abysmally low arts and culture. And that absolutely is not our intention. Our intention is to expand the story of culture add our $4 billion to their money and in terms of impact, and then create new funding sources. And we have music policy. We've got a lot of things. A lot of our music policy council are here at the event, and we are looking at acoustic zoning and a variety of other things. We have a systemically racist, duplicative noise code that disproportionately impacts Black and brown music performers and events. And we've got state liquor laws that are really confounding. So finally, I think Portland has gone from boom to bruise pretty quickly over the last couple of years. We were kind of the sweetheart child for a long time, for businesses, for culture, all kinds of things. And we've taken a big hit, I think a long time coming. And now we're in a moment of figuring out how do we come back from it. And music is going to be central to that. It has to be. And it has been long, boosting the boom. It's going to boost the recovery. We're in the process of changing our city charter for government, and that's going to be a radical change. And for the first time, we've been involved in the regional cultural plan and have new regional funding coming in. I know I run long, I always do. I think the work that MusicPortland has done, and we're starting to really get the cohesion that we need to recognize the leverage that we have in our city and state government and the way that we define the future going forward. So we're excited.
Test, 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 test. Y'all forgot to lock the door and Alaska got in. When we have Northwest convenings, I realized yesterday, we always know you never mean us. But here we are, and I'm so glad that y'all have asked us to the table, because guess what? We got a lot going on and we got a lot to offer. Our connection to the land is really one of the first things that anyone needs to know about visiting Alaska, and it's one of the first things you'll sense if you visit Alaska. I am a grateful guest in the territory of the Aquan and Takuquan, also known as Juneau, Alaska. That place has been inhabited for in the neighborhood of 15,000 years before we came along, before we became a state, 60, 70 years ago? So that's really a very recent blip in what is going on in Alaska. And the longer you live there, the more you feel it. So our connection to where we are, to place, defines our music and also defines our music ecosystem challenges. Our population statewide, about 800,000. And really what defines our experience connected to the rest of the music world is what it takes to get in and out of state. We're about a 5-day drive from here. And I know that because I've done it 7 times, usually for tour. It is one of the coolest things ever. You want to go? Tell me. I will hook you up with where to stop and where the good hot springs are. But when you are an artist and you want to get outside to play, or you want to get outside music resources, whether it's a particular kind of guitar or pedal, a harp, a grand piano, or if you want to go on tour, which I've done for 15 years, it's really expensive and it's really hard, but we still figure it out. We have been doing our own research over the last few years. We've just completed the first ever statewide Alaska music census, which in a lot of ways for us, on the budget we have, the resources we have, also has to function as city level music censuses. But we had a lot of help from the Portland Music Census and Oregon Music Census, thankfully. And we got a pretty great response rate statewide, and much higher response rates in our art-centric cities, which was really exciting. 62% of our respondents make money making music, but only about 25% are full-time. And that's important. We don't want to change our music ecosystem except in the ways that people want it to change. So people want more opportunity, but they don't necessarily want to leave. And more opportunity doesn't necessarily mean becoming a full-time musician or full-time touring band. It might just mean solidity, reasonable compensation, good resources to be a musician in the place where you live, because the place where you live is really important to a lot of Alaskans. The music that we make, I am incredibly freaking proud of. You can find tons of it on Spotify. Look up Music Alaska, one word. You'll find tons of playlists of artists, all genres, all regions, and each of those playlists is continuing to grow. It's our simple shorthand way of indexing artists, but it's different It's really cool. We have incredible festivals. We have tons and tons of music being made essentially by us, for us. Our community is very DIY, but we're also DIO, do it ourselves, right? We got a barn raising mentality, and you can see and feel that everywhere you go. People come up with the most ridiculous creative solutions in the most remote places. It's really fun. And that mentality is very helpful when you're trying to build a music ecosystem. People in Alaska are very spiky about how outsiders see us, and that's outside with a capital O. So if you ever bring up reality TV around any of us, just expect glares, icy glares. But by the same token, whenever visitors come, whether it's tourists, visiting musicians, visiting music policy experts, any of the above, people are incredibly hospitable and eager to show you around. If you're willing to engage with Alaska, Alaskans are very willing to engage with you. And one of our greatest strengths is because when you're a kid, if you want to play the next town over in Little League, you have to get on a jet in a lot of places. And that means that when those kids grow up, they have to get on a jet to go anywhere, and they do. When I moved to Alaska, I thought people would be isolated and homebound, and instead what I found were some of the most metropolitan people I've ever met. Because if you have to get on a jet to go to the next town over, you might as well go bike across Thailand this summer, and people do, right? It's really astounding, and it's a lot of fun. You'll find most Alaskans will be very familiar with your towns and your states because we come down here all the time. And we come down here for concerts. We come down here for music festivals. And we're lucky in Alaska to have a very little, I would say, state government involvement in funding the arts, but tremendous philanthropic, nonprofit, and tribal support of the arts. So when we talk about arts funding, a lot of the time we're not specifically going to or looking to government. We are generally looking to philanthropic bodies or community foundation efforts. We're also lucky in part because of our strong folk and indigenous traditions across genres. We're lucky that it is not hard to get our philanthropic organizations and our government entities to consider popular music of all genres to be valid. It's a push that we've made over the last 10 or 15 years, sitting and talking with, people with millions of dollars to give away to persuade them, hey, guess what? Rock bands and rap artists and traditional music are all valid forms of expression here. And you know what? It's a pretty easy lift to get them to think that because their brothers, their kids, their cousins are doing this. They see that. And as a result, most of our music culture is kind of all genre. Everything goes, because whatever you're making in your neighborhood, that's what goes. A lot of people play in 3 or 4 bands, and sometimes those bands are the most wildly different genres you can imagine. Some of our music festivals are 2 trucks backed up against each other with a crate on top. Chicken Stock takes place in Chicken, Alaska, which has a census population of 12 people. And it's one of the most fun things you will ever go to. It is about a 7-hour drive from anywhere, and it kicks butt. Am I allowed to say? Okay, all right. Anyway, we have tons of little festivals like this, Angry Young and Poor, Trapper Creek Bluegrass Festival, places in the middle of the woods where people gather and fry stuff on a skillet over a fire and have the time of their lives. And we don't even advertise outside, but y'all should come. We also put on fully professional, amazing 15-camera shoot, public media, Netflix special style festivals. We just did in Juneau, Alaska, the second AK Rock, which is our first all-indigenous music festival. About half Alaskan artists, about half visiting indigenous artists. It was amazing. I spent 3 days running around backstage helping make it happen, and my mind was blown, both by the talent, by the community response, and by the quality of the production. Nobody thought we could do that in Juneau, which is a town of about 30,000 people with no road in or out. We can only get there by plane, boat, or birth canal, as we say. But it was absolutely incredible. We had world-class acts there, and I hope that you will, again, consider coming up next time we have it in 2025. The last thing I want to say is we have really boundless opportunity. One thing I specifically want to mention is our access to the Pacific Rim. Anchorage's airport is one of the busiest in the world. You may not know that, but most flights connecting from Asia to Europe stop there to refuel. And if you want to fly to Europe, it's a much shorter flight from Anchorage. Consider going north first next time you're hopping over. And we also have access to the circumpolar region. If you haven't heard the word circumpolar yet, get prepared to hear it more in the future. As the ice caps melt, which is a certainty and a very soon certainty, that is the new Silk Road. That is the new trade route of the world. We do not know what impact that has on global politics yet, but there are a lot of people talking about it. That's going to be Russia, the Nordic countries, Iceland, Greenland, Canada, and the US, although the US generally forgets that. But the north coast of Alaska is going to be significant in the future and is going to be significantly closer to the rest of the world than a lot of the rest of the United States. So remember that as you think of like where global politics is moving in the future. We don't know what that looks like. That uncertainty is a little bit threatening for us. But one thing that we do know through kind of the following the threads of what happens to us in the future, are we looking at population decline? Are we looking at booming population growth? What's going to happen to our resources? What's going to happen to our people? We do know that music is going to be absolutely key to whatever we do because our people are never going to stop making music, whether there's money in it or not. Our goal right now is to connect with all of you to make sure that as they're making the music that they're never going to stop making, that they have some support, some recognition, and that their voices are heard.
I think I'm basically up to here to say what they said, and I'll be done. But seriously, part of the reason we are involved in these conversations and that we've fought hard to be included in this Cascadia terminology and corridor, which has been in discussion whether or not Idaho fits in that or not, is because hopefully, as you can see through the discussion, is like so many similarities that we all share. There's similar challenges, similar opportunities. I'm gonna save some time and not describe your place to you for those of you who are local. And hopefully those of you who are from out of town, Jimmy obviously did a great job explaining some characteristics of Boise, and hopefully you've gotten a sense of who we are and who our music sector is from being here. I will say just a couple notes. Our data is similar to Kate's that I'm pulling is from 50 States Project. And our estimate is there's 282.4 million with 6,940 jobs supported and over 1,000 music establishments. And again, like Kate mentioned, like we feel that's vastly underrepresented, but it's still significant for us. It's still significant to point out to those numbers because I think that can be surprising to a lot of us in Boise and thinking of statewide. As far as our music sector. I think one of the main ideas that we share in relation to our Cascadia partners is that we're a little behind in our data collection. We know that, we know we don't know enough. We know that from being involved in our music scene as we are, we kind of know from the ground kind of who we are and what our makeups are, but we don't know enough. There's been some efforts towards data collection and with partners from the city. They've done great jobs in cultural impact studies and things. We know also, and we're working with them to understand that we need to drill down more specifically into music to capture those that are essentially small businesses and music businesses, and capture those things that aren't already being, that aren't already typically understood as like nonprofit cultural music sectors. And so we know, and those are efforts that we're doing. Part of the, I'm just gonna skip that. And just kind of let you in on like pulling the veil on this is that you are part of this process. Part of us understanding this is having you here today, is having these conversations, is that part of the point for us is the way that we are able to convene and talk about these issues and which you are a part of today. And so we are working toward and know there's opportunity to strengthen partnerships toward similar goals and similar direction. And just to get this whole idea of seeing our sector as like an ecosystem, seeing it as a sector similar to agriculture or other things that are represented in the state is a relatively newer concept for us in Idaho, I think, and so we're just trying to get that messaging out and trying to be involved in these conversations as much as possible.
Okay, so what do we want to see? I think it's poignant to point out that these partnerships we have, I met most of these people on a stage or in a room just like this. Meara and I were on a panel along with Alex Grigg from Music BC about 7 years ago. Yeah. And that was where the very first germ of this started. I'm mostly an all-ages show producer and community organizer disguised as a political operative. And so I was in Fort Collins, Colorado on a panel with Eric Gilbert talking about all-ages show development there. And so we connected in spaces like this. And then he introduced me to his partner, Nathan, and I actually met Marian online. No, I met you in Alaska at the Alaska Independent Music Initiative. That's right, yes, up in Anchorage. So all in moments like this is where we made those connections, and we want to make those connections with every one of you as we drive this work forward. So, who's got the clicker?
You go, click.
Thank you. Thank you. So, what are we looking for in the creative economy in Washington State? We need that data. And I told you, we have a plan to move forward on getting that data. We will work with Shannon at the state. Surely we will work with the City of Seattle folks who are here and get that data in the coming year. We have the University of Washington on deck to help do that research with us. So we're excited about that. Expanding our network. It was notable to me that we have 20 people from the state of Washington here, and 19 of them are from King County, which means we have work to do. Thank you, Craig Jewell, for being here from Bellingham, Washington. Yes. Yeah. Oh, and there's someone here from Vancouver. Great. Yes. Yay. Yay, Sherry.
We can fight over Vancouver.
Regional collaboration. We want to not be doing this in isolation. We want to not be doing this on Zoom. We want it to not be like a select group of people. We want it to be everyone pulling together. We want a touring network. We realized during the pandemic that, and previously, but especially highlighted by the pandemic, that we could be in a situation where we can't jump on planes. We could be. Right? And so having that regional network and also just knowing in these rural areas, as I mentioned, Washington is mostly rural, and so is Idaho, Oregon, and Alaska. We need to know, where are the venues? Where are the record shops? Where are the house shows? Where are the people who will accommodate our musicians, and how do we connect them all together? And then I mentioned earlier, lock in what's working. Wherever you have things that are working, please anchor that stuff so that it carries on into the future, and we all want to be a part of it with you.
All right, Music Oregon, we definitely want to be looking at how we can support touring, either with grants or with partnership programs or with gas cards that we get from oil companies that are evil and need a little good PR. I think band affinity matching is really important, and it's definitely one of those attainable things. We have a remarkable system in Portland called Near Here, NEARHEAR, that allows you to look, you can say, great, show me all the bands playing in the next 2 weeks in Portland by genre. And you can find and start to hear in a pretty efficient way, discover bands that you have an affinity with. And those are the relationships that we want to cultivate between, Boise artists and, Eastern Washington artists with Southern Oregon artists. Let's start to connect the dots, because each of them can bring the other into their own markets. We already have an industry directory, and a venue and performer directory are coming soon, and those will be expanding statewide. I think providing access to resources is really important in this sector that is so kind of isolated and non-standard. And then finally, really getting out and cataloging the venues that are in the smaller and rural communities, and making sure that we support them in a way that gives them best practices, and make sure that they're treating artists fairly, and that they're, sort of fair compensation for artists and good music business is baked into their programs at the outset. And I think we have to support our existing dedicated venues, so we're really coming in for a very hard season in the coming year. So everybody go out and see as much live music as you possibly can.
Yeah, the more I look at these lists and see the overlap, the more I think about, and the more I think about our limited capacity, the more I want to do this stuff together or in replicatable ways. And that's why we've been talking about a Cascadia network. Alaska wants to see what you said, like travel grants, artist exchanges, and coordinated trade routes. We already have informal artist exchanges. I know Sundog's playing at Treefort again. Like we send down Alaskan artists all the time, and then they meet a band and bring them back up. We want to formalize that, make it more normal. Let's have a formal like exchange student, what's that version for bands? Can we do that with Boise? Can we do that with Seattle and Portland and with smaller communities too? I think it would be fun and exciting to get your artists known up north and to get our artists known down here. Funding pools to support travel, that extra hop. We know where to look for that. We kind of need to build a money bucket to hold it of some kind. I don't know if that's all 4 states independently or like all together, but we need a money bucket for a touring pool that we can figure out how to administer. And a Cascadia regional resource hub and community network. What we've been talking about is how to share information, how to share resources, how to share our various like venue lists that we're building, things like that, and how to share best practices across our states. Because like as you're talking about, you want a rural venue to know that they should be experiencing best practices. That means somebody's got to build a website or a flyer and get it to them. And we should all be in that together because it'll go a lot faster, a lot easier, and I like the sound of doing that work together. I would love to see a little bit of space held for regular convenings of some of the bodies in this room online, because since Zoom has opened up to Alaska, we've been able to be in the room, honestly. We were not before. We really weren't. And now we can be. It's really exciting. So I hope that continues.
So I mentioned the data collection piece, census, audit, so we know who our music businesses are, who our artists are. That's definitely a need for us. The rest of these are, and I also want to make sure and point out that the great leadership and partnership with BSU in recognizing some of these things and offering with Dr. Amanda Ashley, some invaluable research tools and work on it. And thank you all who took the survey. That will be continuing, and I don't know how much that will be discussed today, but those pieces of that data will be discussed at a later date as well, if not today. The rest of these are not a checklist or an agenda, but just more ideas to get your wheels turning on what could be possible, what sort of policy things we could do. So something that we, it's come up a couple times, just access to startup capital and small business support. Essentially, you're not talking like charity-related sort of things, but like as viewing our artists and bands as small businesses, just having some of that same access to capital that other sectors have. Yeah. Yes, and helping, the other thing we'd like to see is like to really help music spaces stay competitive in a challenging real estate market such as Boise. It took us, when we founded Boise All Ages Movement Project, we actually had some financial support from the community behind it. But we offered on 5 buildings right out of the gate, and because of the way the real estate market was, we were unsuccessful in all of those. So there is precedent locally for things such as land trust, and so if there was something maybe like a cultural land trust for these not only culturally significant and historic buildings, but music spaces. And the other thing is just like a practical idea that is really necessary for our musicians, just parking access and loading zones at venues, just reducing a barrier that we face to do their job.
And from there, I think we're on to Q&A if we have any time left. Who's going to tell us if we do or don't?
Yeah, do we have time, anyone? Questions from the audience? Oh, Jamie, did you have your hand up?
Hi, Can you tell us a little bit more about Near Here? Who runs that? How do you source the information? How long's it been going? And then who has access to it?
It's a public, free site. Anybody can go right now, nearhere.app. It is created by a remarkable woman in Portland named Liz Gabriel, who has created a whole automated system that collects all of the bands that are performing, plus an incredible archive of a number of years, and then matches those up with sound samples so that you can hear the bands. You can buy a ticket with one click. It's a great system. And I know that to date, I think she's been primarily funded through our organizations. I think she deserves to be hugely successful. And I know she's interested in talking with other cities, so she's gonna kill me for saying that, but sorry, Liz. It's a great system, and I think it's one of those sort of innovative ideas that says, okay, how do we make it better? You know, if you've got 700 options for that night, how do you winnow it down and find something new that you want to hear for the first time that is going to be amazing? So, yeah, let me know. I can connect anybody with her.
Other questions, anyone? Not sure we have any questions from the room. So, how do we move from here? How do we go forward from here? I would like to suggest to you all, and I haven't consulted with my esteemed colleagues about this, but that following the Music Policy Forum Conference and the Cascadia Music Summit, we send out to you all an invitation to show up at a collective Zoom where we hopefully you will have some questions and some input, and we can go from there. We'll see who shows up. Let's start there. You will be invited. We'll pull it together. We'll make it happen. Look forward to seeing you on screen. And thank you all very much for being here with us today.